Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Amy Jewers, and I am can you see my screen?
No,
No.
just your face.
Okay. I'm the president of the Des Moines Lake Association Board, and I'm really happy that we're all here today. And I am recording this, so if there's any questions from the audience, you can use the chat or you can unmute yourself, and we are more than welcome to answer questions throughout the presentation or at the end. And I'm joined today, our special guest is Emily Moore. She is the you have a very long title, by the way, so bear with me. Aquatic Invasive Species Coordinator, Water Resources Specialist for the Burnett County Land Services Department. Now that is a mouthful, but you have been an incredible asset to our lake and our APM, obviously, which is what we're going to talk about today. And I'm really happy that you're here to share some of your findings and thoughts and advice to us and our lake members, our association members, and surrounding communities. So with that, I will let you go ahead and take over. And again, I'll monitor the chat for questions, and we hope that everybody enjoys this presentation today. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Amy. I'll share my screen. Presentation. And then give me 1 second. Okay. So today I'll be talking about the Aquatic Plant Management Plan summary of results for the Des Moines Lake Association. They reached out to me to do an aquatic plant management plan for them, primarily to get them on board to apply for any rapid response grants or grants in general for the lake going forward. An APM is required for DNR grants. So, but they also wanted to know kind of what was going on with the lake in general. So I will just take it away from that. Basically, it's going to be short and sweet. I'll just go over some of the results. I'll start with water quality first because that's the smallest section, and then I'll get into the plant surveys, invasive species, and then what we finalized for our goals and objectives. And then later on, after all that, I'll show you how to find the APM on our website. So Burnett County and I didn't do water quality sampling for the APM. That's a separate plan that the Lake Association can do. It's called a lake management plan. So these results are from the Citizen Lake Monitoring Program that the Des Moines Lake Association does for the lake. You basically take different measurements following the program and you input it into the DNR website, SWIMS. So these measurements basically take in account temperature, chlorophyll A, which is basically algae within the water, and Secchi disc readings to see how clear the water is by lowering a disc in the water column. And all of these results take in the trophic state measurements for the lake. From what you guys have been taking, what I found is Des Moines is basically a nutrient poor water body. It doesn't have a whole lot of algae or chlorophyll A in the lake. So you're looking at more of a lithotrophic to a mesotrophic water body. So that kind of ties into also the plant community. So what we found was Des Moines really didn't have a lot of plants, and I'll get into that in a little bit, but those water quality measurements really tie into the plant community. So if you had a eutrophic lake, which is basically a lake that has a lot of nutrients, you're going to have a lot of algae and a lot of plants within the lake versus your oligotrophic and mesotrophic lakes. One suggestion that the DNR had through the APM process is we can't really give a full water quality sampling result for Des Moines because there's not a whole lot of water quality results from the Citizen Lake Monitoring Program. So one suggestion was to just continually take more of those water samples. So this is what I found from the SWIMS database from the samples that you guys take. On the left, you see the graph that I made from your your samples, they're separated out in color by year. So you have 2023 is blue, and then 2022 is yet orange, and then so on and so forth. So you kind of see the same trend here with the Secchi disc readings on the left. That's in feet. So a lot of the readings are staying in between 15 and 25 feet, which is great water clarity. You can technically see at least 20 feet down within the lake. There is a drop between September and October. That isn't necessarily saying that the water quality is dropping. That could just mean that the lake is turning over, which the warmer water on top during the summer is actually seeping down and turning over with the cold water as winter moves in. So don't be alarmed about that drop. It's just, a natural process for these lakes that are deeper, like Des Moines, and have a stratification during the summer. This is just another figure on the right of what you'll find in the SWIMS database with your Secchi disc readings, your total phosphorus that you take with those samples, and then the chlorophyll A. And you can see they're all kind of staying in that dark blue zone, which is your oligotrophic water body, like I said here, which is, nutrient poor. I'll change gears a little bit and go towards the aquatic plant side of things, where this could correlate with some of the water quality stuff that we're seeing. Like I said, nutrient poor equals low plant life. For APMs, or aquatic plant management plans, it's required to sample all aquatic plants and invasive species using a point intercept survey. So a point intercept survey is basically sampling every single one of these points that you can see on the right figure. So Des Moines has 604 points, and we went to every single one of these to find the littoral zone, or where the plants grow within the lake, and I'll get to that in the next slide. Once we find out where those plants stop and when they're too deep, then we kind of just skip over some of those points. And with Des Moines Lake, there was a lot of points that were over our littoral zone. So those are the deeper areas of the lake, between like 15 and like 20, 30 feet plus in water depth. Of the total 604 points that were sampled, only 131 of those sites contained aquatic plants. As you can imagine, each lake varies with how many aquatic plants are present. This is just a summary of what all the stuff that we collected throughout the APM, and what we put into our spreadsheet for analysis. So we sampled for aquatic plants at each depth, and we figured out what their maximum depth of plants are and the overall depth of colonization. So what does the plant community look like? Where are these species growing? That sort of thing. Species richness. So the more species you have and different types of species, the greater biodiversity the lake has, which is what you want. You want more species that are different than you want the same, which if you have an invasive species, for instance, that invasive species like curly-leaf pondweed or Eurasian water milfoil can disrupt that species richness and create a monoculture, which means less species diversity. Number of sites where each species was found. So at each location, we took each species, identified them to species level, and at each point we can tell how many species we found, which I'll get into that in the next slide. I'll have a photo for that. Average rake fullness at each location or point on the map, we throw a rake, and the rake is in criteria of 1 to 3. So 1 being there wasn't a whole lot of plants found, versus 3, the whole rake was covered. We can't even see the rake. There is a 0, which means we threw the rake and there was no plants there. These are getting more into statistics, which I recommend you reading the APM to kind of get more of the statistical side of these last 4. I'm not going to get into them. I do describe them in great detail in the APM. For this spread or for this presentation, I'll just be going over these two, the maximum depth of plants and overall depth colonization and the number of sites where each species was found. So this is a figure on the right just showing where we found aquatic plants. So primarily we found them in 3 to 4 feet of water. The deepest we found them was 13 feet. So this graph shows the littoral zone of where those aquatic plants are grown. So we didn't find anything beyond 14 feet, and primarily found between 3 to 4 feet. And this is usually because once the lake drops off, the the sun can't penetrate as deep down in deeper lakes like Des Moines, so it's not uncommon to find the littoral zone only being 13 feet. And you can kind of see here what types of plants that we would find within these areas. So you have your cattails, which are your emergent species, and then your wild rice. Des Moines doesn't have wild rice, but a lot of lakes around here do. And then once you get into the deeper areas, like the 3 to 4 feet, that's when you start finding your submergent plants, like your northern milfoils and your Chara species. And you can kind of see a better image here of the littoral zone that I'm talking about. So just imagine that once where that arrow meets the limnetic zone or the open water zone, that's kind of where that 14 feet would be. And then you have all your plants, and then it drops off because there's not a light penetration within those zones. Sampling points with plants. So the species that we found primarily was variable leaf pondweed. We found that species at 72 of our sites. You can see on the right here is the distribution of where we found the species. So each dot indicates a point that was sampled on the lake. So 1 being the sparse, we didn't really find a whole lot of plants, is white. 2 is intermediate. There was some species on the rake, but not a whole lot. That one's green. And then 3, the whole rake was covered in this species, and that's red. There was some areas that were shallower that we could just look in the water without sampling with the rake. And those are called visual sightings. And that is indicated with the blue check mark. So in the APM, in one of the appendix sections, every single plant that we found will have a map associated with where we found it. And the map would just look similar to what this map looks like. It did take 2 days to sample the entire lake. So we started on July 24th and ended on July 26th of last year. On the left is just all the other plants that we found that don't include visuals. So there's 10 species here that we found with the rake or visual, or with just the rake. We didn't, I didn't include the visual sightings on here. We did find purple loosestrife during our sampling, but we did know that purple loosestrife was present on the lake. So this is the distribution that we've seen on June 4th. We do sample invasive species earlier in the year, and then our full aquatic plant survey later in the year. So you do see that we did sample multiple times during the summer. Being that this species is a shoreline plant, we just put it all on the scale of 1 because we didn't technically throw a rake for this. We just had a visual sightings, but primarily on that east side of the shoreline. That was the plant community, just in a nutshell. So I want to go back to this graph here. So I did mention that oligotrophic lakes or nutrient poor lakes don't tend to have a lot of plants within them because of the nutrients that are within the water body. So Des Moines actually, out of a lot of the other lakes that we sampled, had uh, a very low aquatic plant community. So we only technically found 10 species. whereas we sampled Lipset Lake in Rusk Township for their aquatic plant management plan update the same year, and we actually found 40 different species of aquatic plants. And Lipset Lake is actually a eutrophic lake, so you can tell eutrophic lakes that have a lot of that nutrients is going to have more plants versus the ligotrophic lakes that have the the lower species. So compared to a lot of lakes that we had APMs for, Des Moines definitely didn't have a whole lot of plants within the water body. That isn't to say that that is a bad thing. It's just, these water quality measurements do coincide with the plant community. Getting into the plan goals, so I worked with the Des Moines Lake Subcommittee to go over these plan goals. We had multiple meetings to discuss these goals, and then we also sent out that lake user survey to get the public input on um, the issues that they see within the water body and what they would like to see in the aquatic plant management plan. So we did incorporate those in there. And we also had that public input uh, presentation at the annual Lake Association meeting last year too, just presenting these goals. So I'll go through each one and kind of discuss some of the suggestions and how to move forward with these goals. So the first one was to prevent the introduction and spread of aquatic invasive species. This one's fairly common because, most of the lake associations don't want AIS in their lake. So what I suggest from what we took from the lake user survey is the people or the lake community around Des Moines Lake should start working on their identification skills, because I didn't include that figure in here, but maybe it's in the next couple slides. But a lot of the people that answered the survey said that they were unsure on how to identify curly leaf pondweed and Eurasian water milfoil, which are two of the aquatic invasive species plants that are found in the county. So having more eyes on the lake will help prevent the introduction and spread of these invasive species. And I do offer workshops in the summer for those identification of those species. Extensive monitoring is also another thing that I suggest. Even you don't have to go to the full scale of the point intercept survey like we did, but there are some techniques that you guys can do while you're just boating around in the lake to just look at some of the plants, see if you see any that are just taking over and letting me know. Extensive monitoring doesn't have to be a laborsome effort. You guys are already out on the lake. I suggest that, get up on your identification skills and just do some monitoring while you're out there. Another thing that the Lake Association and the committee or the community members can do is decontaminate. So right now, Des Moines has the bleach station with the decontamination station. Among other lake associations around the county, I think we have at least 30 decon stations across our county. Des Moines Lake Association did just get approved a pressure washer station to basically update their bleach solution or bleach station, which this Des Moines is the third lake association in the county to do this. So the other pressure washer stations are at Lipset Lake. They have a cold water station, and then Fish Lake also has a new pressure washer station, which is a hot station. So the one thing that I can say about, these lake associations updating their stations is it kind of falls in line with Burnett County being the first county to amend our ordinance for do not transport and adding the decontamination stations in there. We were the first county in the state of Wisconsin to actually require lake or boaters and community members to spray off their equipment with the bleach, and then slowly Washburn, Polk County, Barron, and some other counties are starting to follow suit with those stations. And now I think we are the first county in the state of Wisconsin to have lake associations apply for grants to uh, basically put in these pressure washer stations, which is a huge leap forward in preventing the introduction and spread of invasive species. Um, the bleach can go a long way, but there comes with maintenance, with changing the bleach out, making sure that it's not degraded over time in the sunlight. But with these pressure washer stations, there isn't really a whole lot of maintenance to them. There's a few different larger entities like NOAA that recommends um, adding these pressure washer stations in, not only to like a permanent station at the landings, but using pressure washers that are mobile. I know when I was working as an intern with Minnesota, we had traveling decon stations where we went to the lakes that had very high profile invasive species like starry stonewort, where they would use a pressure washer station to decon um, the the equipment. So it's awesome that our lake associations are starting to get on board with installing these. So stay tuned with that. I know there's another meeting with the association that's going to be talking about this station, but um, it's nice to see these lake associations going above and beyond with installing these decontamination stations. Our next goal was reduce and control the spread of purple loosestrife, abandoned and Chinese mystery snails. So I know there's invasive species staff, I guess I could say, or volunteers that or are controlling the purple loosestrife in some areas on the lake. Here's a photo of some volunteers cutting and taking out the rootstock in a bog on the lake. I know there's a huge effort to control the purple loosestrife, so I know this is going to continue going forward. With the banded and Chinese mystery snails, there's a little research to show what types of methods work to reduce and control the spread of these snails, but I know just continually taking them off of your shoreline as they float towards your shoreline is something that works. These snails do carry the vector for swimmer's itch. So if you go in the water and you come out and you just feel like you have swimmer's itch, it's probably because you have a lot of snails along your shoreline. So it's a good effort to just take those off of your shoreline and dispose of them, which you could dry them, make sure they're dead, and then just throw them in the garbage. The third goal was educate the community regarding aquatic plant management, appropriate native plant management actions, and erosion control practices. So this section, there's a lot of information for aquatic plant management in the appendix section, and I'll show you where to find that later. And then erosion control practices, you can actually work with me if you are having erosion control issues on your shorelines. I also deal with the shoreline practices within the county, so you can reach out to me and I can come out and do a site visit with you. So I think this slide is where I wanted to find my initial slide, but native plant management actions. So I know a lot of people like to remove your emergent vegetation along the shoreline to create access areas for swimming and boating. However, those emergent or submergent or emergent species that grow, let's see, upland in the littoral zone, not the submergent ones that are underwater, but the ones that are just right by your shoreline, those like your lily pads, your bulrushes, your arrowheads, those species actually do a great deal at protecting your shoreline from wave action. So if you have issues with wake boats or wind, if you're on the windward side of the lake and you just have a lot of wind crashing on your shoreline, just disrupting it, these plants actually do a lot of good to keep on your shoreline because those protect from the force of those waves. So we do recommend that you keep those along the shoreline. This figure actually was supposed to be up further, so I'll just go, it's a little bit out of order, but this was, I think, goal objective number 1 or 2 when I was talking about the lake user survey and people saying that they were unsure of if they could recognize curly pondweed, Eurasian water milfoil, and purple loosestrife. Primarily, a lot of the members that took the survey said they could not identify these species. So I do recommend that a workshop is completed to help people with identification. But just keep in mind that this figure is out of order, and I apologize about that. Our next goal was maintain and
Emily,
improve.
Emily,
Yeah.
this is Amy. Is that workshop, is that an in-person thing that you actually come to the lake, or is it over a Zoom like this?
Usually, it's on a weekend and it's in person.
In person, okay. At the actual lake, like,
Yep,
or,
yep, we could do it at someone's house or at
okay,
the landing, wherever you guys
okay,
want to do it.
okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay, so the fourth objective is maintain and improve water quality. So the DNR suggested continuing doing the citizen lake monitoring program, monitoring. So that's one thing that I suggest, keep moving forward with that. Keep following up with your water quality, because once you can kind of see the results declining or improving is when you know there's something going on in the lake. So if you do see, hey, my Secchi disc readings for my clarity depth are decreasing, and it's been decreasing for a couple of years now, you'll capture that data with that program. So once you can kind of see those trends move forward, either decreasing or increasing, that's when you can kind of start maintaining or improving water quality. But at this time, with what we found with the data you guys have, the water quality looks good. We still continue to suggest improving those shoreline buffers, because if you don't have anything to really stop runoff coming into the lake, or let's say fertilizers, or removing aquatic plants or anything like that that basically gets into the lake, you're going to have a hard time trying to get your water quality back up. So here's an example of, it's not Des Moines, it's a different lake in the county, where we have a property that doesn't have a shoreline buffer. You can see this is an invasive species. It's Eurasian water milfoil, and it has a lot of filamentous algae attached to it. So you can see a nice manicured lawn. It slopes down towards the lake, and as it rains or someone waters their grass, all of that phosphorus and nitrogen that's on the shoreline could be getting into this into the water, causing the water quality to look turbid. Invasive species like Eurasian water milfoil and curly leaf pondweed do like these more disturbed areas. So you are going to find that if you do have a manicured lawn like this, and you do have curly leaf pondweed and Eurasian water milfoil, but Des Moines doesn't. But if, say, you did, you would probably see that species kind of hanging around your dock, compared to the left side, where this shoreline's obviously 100% natural. We don't expect you guys to have 100% natural shorelines, but you can see there's no invasive species present in front of the shoreline, and the water clarity looks a little bit better than this side. And to note, these shorelines are actually neighbors. So just keep that in mind. But this is one thing that we do recommend is, those shoreline buffers, they might not be the most aesthetic thing that you want for your property, but it does help property values. It does help your water clarity and quality in front of your property, and it does minimize the risk of having invasive species in front of your lake shore. Lastly, we wanted to develop a rapid response plan for aquatic invasive species. So this rapid response plan was for curly leaf pondweed, Eurasian water milfoil, and zebra mussels. You could read this on your own. It's in Appendix G on page 89 and 90. This is basically stating, hey, if you guys get curly leaf pondweed or any of these other species, we can follow step by step on how our plan of action on either eradicating the aquatic plants from the initial findings, or work on a plan to move forward on how to live with these invasive species. But like I said earlier, prevention and just using those decon stations and upgrading your identification skills and your monitoring on the lake goes a long way. I mean, it is time, but if you care about Des Moines and don't want these invasive species getting into your lake, I do recommend taking those steps for identification, monitoring, and always decontaminating your equipment, whether that's checking your dock after you take your dock out of the lake. If you're purchasing a new dock, but it was a used dock at some other lake, make sure you decontaminate that dock before you put it in. If you have friends coming up and they want to bring their boat or other recreational equipment like jet skis or anything like that, make sure that they're decontaminating everything before they get into the water. Now I'm going to show you, so that was the end of my presentation. I guess I could take some questions before I go to the website. Hopefully I didn't go too quick.
No, you were awesome. So much great information. There's such a thing as a shoreline incentive program. Is that active this year again? Or
Yes.
yeah, can
Yep.
you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so Burnett County has a shoreline incentive program where properties can enroll their shoreline into the program, and it opens the doors for cost sharing opportunities like rain gardens, diversions, native plantings, where the county covers 70% of the practices and the landowner would cover the remaining 30% of what that practice costs. You do need to have a shoreline that follows the shoreline ordinance. So you have to have a natural area and you have to have a viewing corridor, which is basically where you use your property the most. That's where your dock is, your stairs, that sort of thing. That measures 35 feet wide, or depending on how much shoreline frontage you have. The caveat is say you have 100 feet of shoreline, and you're allowed a 35-foot viewing corridor to use your property. In the shoreline incentive program, you're only allowed a 30-foot viewing corridor. But the incentive is on this program is it protects the shoreline and it opens the door for cost share opportunities. So if you're interested in the program or want to know more information, I can come out and do a site visit, see if you qualify, and that sort of thing. You do get a $50 check at the end of each year, just as a appreciation for having your shoreline natural within the program.
Awesome. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Anything else? Otherwise, I can show you where to find the APM on the website.
You can go ahead and start clicking around. And if anybody wants to unmute and ask any
Okay.
questions, they can. There's nothing in the chat yet.
So here's the website. You just have to go to departments and then where land services and zoning, you click on that. And then we are the conservation division. So if you click the plus sign, go to past projects. You can also find other programs like our shoreline incentive program, like I just mentioned here. So if you click on here, it goes into more about the program, the brochure, that sort of thing. on that. We also have plant lists on this tab, how to create a natural shoreline here. So you can check that out if you want. But for the APM, we're under past projects. All of our APMs that we've done for lake associations you can find here. We do have lake associations that update their APM. So like I said, we did Lipset Lake last year, coinciding with Des Moines. So their updated APM is here. For Des Moines, it's here. So if you click on that, it'll show the PDF. So there's 92 pages with the APM. It was approved on February 8th by the DNR. And it goes through each section. So we have just basic information about the lake, the lake user survey. So that survey that you guys filled out, some of the results are here that I thought were important. But if you wanted to find the full response, it's going to be in the appendix section. Right here, Appendix E,
Oh,
you'll find the whole user survey. There's water quality. So you can go through and check out all the water quality stuff that came off of the Citizen Lake Monitoring website. So there's that graph I showed you. There's more language on that graph in the APM that I suggest that you guys read. Different zones of what a lake looks like is in here, and how it coincides with Des Moines, and just some other previous stuff that coincides with the lake. Then it gets into a little bit more about the plant surveys. Let's see. Aquatic plant community. So just the different type of plants that you'll find in the community. All the statistics that we ran on the lake. So here's those 4 that I didn't go over. You can read more about those in this section. And then towards the end is all the aquatic plant maps. So those are your all the plants that we found, which points we found them at, what side of the lake they're at, that sort of thing would be in I think it's Appendix A. Yep, Appendix A. So that starts on page 39. The goals and objectives more laid out are going to be under the plan, goals, and strategies section. So that starts on page 32. So this is what the subcommittee went over, and the meetings that we had, and the lake user survey. Those inputs got put into here, and then also the public input presentation. So more on what the Lake Association wants to tackle with this APM. The APM does go for 5 years. So within the 5 years, this is the plan that the Lake Association can follow going forward. And then I did mention the aquatic plant management strategies. You can find those in Appendix C and D for that. So everything is in here, and I recommend you reading it to get familiar with what the plan was about. There's just a lot of information in on how all these different processes work together, and yeah, so you can find that on our website.
wow, so much information and so valuable for us to hear it from you, but also just to have this as a resource for us into the future is just really amazing. Thanks for all of your hard work.
Yeah, for
I
sure.
don't see any other questions, but I also need to give a quick shout out to the other task force members that helped bring this all together, because we all, obviously you and your team, Emily, worked the hardest with this masterpiece, but I also want to give a quick shout out to Chris Franken, and she also helps with the Citizen Lake Monitoring for Des Moines Lake as well. Holly Husso, who's on the board for the association, Jenny Johnson, and Michelle Schroeder. Those people, we were all a team, and without everybody working together, we couldn't have made this happen. So just wanted to give a quick shout out to those wonderful people. And Thank you very much. And also thank you again for coming to our annual meeting last year and just kind of laying some foundation for us for this. And, you know, maybe not talking to you would be a good thing because then we don't have any issues. but no, you've been
Yeah.
also just very helpful in many ways for our association. So I want to thank you. And I'm probably going to have to take you up on that offer to do the in-person session where we learn how to identify these plants, and we can definitely, we have a pretty strong following on social media. We can definitely echo a lot of that through our social channels and our newsletter as well. So all this information is very valuable. So thank you, Emily, and thank you to all who attended. And I'm going to stop the recording and thank you again.
I had a question
Oh,
for Emily,
here we go.
if it's
Hello.
not too
Hey,
late.
Jim.
No,
No,
go ahead.
Come on in.
Yeah, Emily, you talked about the Chinese snails. Now, do they have to have something else with them to cause that the swimmer's itch, duck itch, whatever you want to call it? Does it have to have duck feces or?
I don't think so. I think just the chemical makeup they have is just the vector for the swimmer's itch. I don't think they have to have anything else associated with it, but I could look into it more. I'm not 100% sure, but I think it's just standalone.
And the other thing is, we always noticed, we thought that it got worse when the water was high. In other words, when there was more things coming off the shore, debris in that, as opposed to we're saying, I know on my shore, you couldn't see any sand. It was right up to the edge of the hill. I'm on a hill. And it seemed that it was worse when the water was high, the swimmer's itch, but maybe I'm wrong. But,
Yeah, I'm not sure with that. I'm not 100% sure on that observation, but I know it could be if the water is a little bit higher, there might be some more nutrients coming in from, you know, the lawns or
Mhm.
just runoff. So they might just have more to eat when the water's higher than when it's lower. It could also mean maybe just a little bit more oxygen is available too for them. But
Okay.
yeah, I'm not 100%
Okay.
sure.
Well, so just rake them up basically is the best way to get rid of them off of your, out of your, lake, out of your swimming area.
Yeah, there's for the aquatic animals like your snails and zebra mussels and anything with a shell, there isn't a whole lot of evidence for control, unfortunately, unless you want to get a permit or a plan to do chemical applications. But I know the Wisconsin DNR is pretty strict on that, but there isn't a whole lot of evidence for actual control methods rather than just the manual removal once you get them. So
Okay.
you're basically living with those species that have shells once they're in there, unfortunately.
All right. Thank you.
Emily, yeah. Any other questions, Jim? I wanted to add one thing to that too. I remember on a previous call, I asked you, Emily, I'm like, can you ever take out too many snails out of your lake? And you said, no, there's no, so don't fear about that, right? Like it's okay to remove them.
Yep,
All
for
right.
sure.
All right. Anything else, anybody? Okay, great. Well, I'm going to press pause and record and